polls across Germany have now closed. The ballot counting is now underway to determine what kind of European Parliament voters have chosen for the next 5 years. Now, going into this election, it was clear the European Parliament vote will be a major test for Germany's own federal government, led by Chancellor Olaf Scholz. Chancellor Scholz's Social Democrats are expected to see a sharp drop compared to national elections 3 years ago. And the opposition Conservatives, they are projected to come in first place today. The far-right Alternative for Germany is vying to become the second strongest party. And this is important for the European Parliament. Germany accounts for 96 of the 720 European Parliament seats. That's a major number there. We've been speaking to voters here in the German capital and in Frankfurt, many telling us that taking part in these elections today, they consider to be...
I think Europe and the EU only have a chance if they act together and continue to develop. Particularly in the current world situation, where everyone is actually isolating themselves from each other. I think it's very important to continue to stand up for peace and democracy.
I'm from the UK, and they pulled out of the European Union. I'm naturalized in Germany, so it was quite important for me to say that I'm a member of Europe. Yes, so it was important for me personally to take part.
The shift to the right certainly also plays a role in the fact that you should vote against this. But basically, it's also the opportunity to influence politics, to exert a direct influence.
It's especially important because we must stand up for democracy in Europe. So it's important to vote to preserve democracy.
And as we were saying, Germany has more seats in the European Union Parliament than any other country. That makes the results that are beginning to come in that much more important for all of Europe. And we are now just getting first indications of how Germans have voted. Let's pull those numbers up for you. As expected, the biggest share of the German vote appears to have gone to the center-right CDU-CSU. The Conservatives seem to have improved on their result from 5 years ago. They're showing a gain of about 7 percentage points. That's a serious gain there. But it looks like many of Germany's voters have turned their backs on the Greens since they entered Germany's governing coalition 3 years ago. I mean, we're looking at a loss of nearly half of their vote share compared to the last election. Take a look right there. The Greens with now 12%. That is a major loss. And despite scandals at home and in Brussels, the far-right AfD party, they seem to have gained about 5% compared to 5 years ago. The AfD now polling at 16.5%. That's according to these first exit polls that we've got coming in, that just came in the last minute. All right, let's cross now to our chief political correspondent, Nina Haase. She is joining us from the Greens party headquarters here in Berlin. Nina, let's talk about these preliminary results. It is the opposite of what they were celebrating 5 years ago.
Yeah, you can say that. And there was silence here in this room in Berlin when those first figures showed up on the big screen right behind me. 12.5%. That is even less than what the latest polls had predicted. So the Greens were aware that they were probably going to suffer losses, but they were expecting some 14% at least. Now it's 12.5%. Now that is a very big loss compared to 5 years ago. And that obviously has to do with the topics that the voters considered important in Germany for these European elections. While last time, so 5 years ago, people were very much aware that climate change was a thing and that climate protection needed to be done thoroughly, and it was the topic number one for voters. This time around, it's securing peace in Europe. That is the topic number one. Social security comes second, and third is migration, while climate protection is only the fourth topic that was considered important by voters. So, of course, the Greens lost one of their core competencies, if you will, in the voters' will, which explains partly why they suffered these big losses tonight.
And Nina, how do leaders from the Greens Party, how do they explain this loss? I know you've been speaking with them. You also speak with voters all the time. I mean, what did the Greens do? What did the Greens not do that led to this kind of loss?
Well, one, it is the topics. Climate change is sort of taking a back seat at the moment because of Russia's ongoing war against Ukraine, where securing peace on this continent is deemed crucial, and the Greens don't have that topic as their core competency. But also when it comes to their core competency, Brent, the Greens have suffered credibility when it comes to voters. If we take the example, for example, of the combustion engines, where the EU has said that they want to not allow combustion engines from the year 2035. So new cars with combustion engines wouldn't be allowed in the EU. That is something that 69% of Germans don't agree with across the board, apart from the Greens. So the potential there in these kind of topics is reducing for the Greens. Also, of course, the Greens are saying that they have been made the core enemy by conservatives and the far right alike. So they have talked of campaigns against them where they have been singled out as the one party that wants to dictate too much for people, that they are infringing on people's individual liberties, etc. So it's a mix of topics that they're trying to get across.
And Nina, let's broaden this out and let's ask what this is going to mean for the Chancellor here in Germany and his governing coalition in the upcoming elections, the regional elections here in Germany. I mean, this is going to leave a bad taste in people's mouths, isn't it?
Yes, it is not a new phenomenon that German voters usually take the EU elections as a way of essentially telling the government that they're doing a bad job in Berlin. So this is something that is also happening this year around. If you look at all the results from the Greens and the Social Democrats and the FDP, who are forming this government in Berlin, and if you look at polls from recent weeks, there's a very small percentage of people who are actually happy with how the government is doing. In fact, only 22% say that the government is doing a good job, and especially the way the parties are dealing with each other is something that voters are not happy with at all. There's a lot of infighting, there's a lot of public arguing, and this is something where the government coalition of Olaf Scholz by the Social Democrats will have to really get their act together if they do want to get better results at the federal elections next year in the autumn.
Yeah, these first exit numbers, certainly a slap in the face for Greens across Europe, but particularly here in Germany. Our chief political correspondent, Nina Haase, there at the Green Party headquarters here in Berlin. Nina, we'll be coming back to you a little bit later throughout the evening. Thank you. All right, we want to take this now to our chief political editor, Michaela Küfner. She is at party headquarters for Germany's Christian Democrats, the CDU. Michaela, I guess the mood there has got to be one of elation. I mean, these numbers you couldn't have ordered them any better for the Conservatives, could you?
Well, there is a slight gain in these elections. They have been able to defy the forces of further fragmentation of the German political spectrum. At the same time, there was really a moment of silence while everybody was taking in here that the gain really wasn't that significant. It's going to be between 1% and 2% if you take together the conservative CDU and its sister party, the CSU in Bavaria. It's important to count them together. And it's kind of redefining what winning means. Winning in these European elections means not losing from your majority. And we've seen that the other big tent party, the Social Democrats, is on the way down. The Greens, who are on the way up to becoming a big tent party, have lost significantly. And the conservative CDU-CSU is the one left standing. So not elation here, but self-confidence that they are on a trajectory that could see them regain governing here in Germany as well after we have elections next year. Yes, they're happy, but they're not ecstatic here.
Well, how much is this vote being seen as a referendum on Chancellor Scholz's center-left government? I mean, and do they see this being a test that the government has clearly failed?
It clearly has failed this test. And there's also an acute awareness here that just as Olaf Scholz managed to win the last national elections because the conservative CDU with Merkel leaving office was so weak, there is a sense here to not get overconfident that holding on to those almost 30%. It's going to be a big psychological issue whether the conservative CDU-CSU bloc manages to scratch those 30% or remains just slightly below here. Whether that just means that the coalition of Olaf Scholz is exactly that. It's weakened. It has historically low opinion polls here in Germany. So yes, this also was a referendum that showed the weakness in public support of this current governing coalition led by the Social Democrats and including the pro-business Free Democrats and the Greens.
And Michaela, help us understand too, we're talking about the importance of today's vote for a new European Union Parliament and why that has implications for Germany's national government. Could today's vote, could it signal a shift in German politics before next year's general election? We know a year's a long time in politics, but talk to us about why this could be a bellwether event.
Well, today proves that the political center has shifted slightly to the right. At the same time, the fact that the far-right AfD party failed to reach what it was hoping for in the opinion polls. Last time it got 11%. This time it's going to be about 16.5, maybe 17, a far cry from the 20 they were hoping for. It shows that mainstream politics, post-Merkel, conservatism already shifted further towards conservative, towards the right, and that is the big winner of the night. So the mainstream is no longer on Social Democrat territory. At the same time, the far-right rise seems to be exhausted well below the 20 percentage point nationally. But then we have regional elections in three eastern states where we could see the far-right AfD become the strongest party in autumn. But this was the big national test.
Our chief political editor, Michaela Küfner, there at headquarters for the conservative CDU here in Berlin. Michaela, thank you. All right, I want to go now to my colleague Matthew Moore. He is at Germany's far-right Alternative for Germany party headquarters here in Berlin. Matthew, talk to me. These numbers coming in, the AfD so far with about 16.5% of the vote. How's that going down there where you are?
Well, I'll tell you what, the mood here is ecstatic because I don't think anyone in the room thought that they would get that result after the nightmare of an election campaign that they had. Their two leading candidates riddled in scandals for the last weeks and months. And frankly, tonight they feel like they're the winners tonight, although they say that they are the second strongest party. And what they said is the leaders, when the results were announced, the leaders of the parties went on stage to huge cheers. And what they said was that this will send a message that they can win, that they can come first in crucial state elections in eastern Germany later this year. And this has really given them a huge gust of wind in their sails, if you like, because, as I say, the last weeks and months have been so kind of damaging to the party with scandals over links to Chinese spies and Russian financiers. So it's, I think the mood here is jubilant, Brent.
Yeah, and there were hopes going into this election that the AfD would have about 20% of the vote here in Germany. They didn't get that, at least that's not what they're getting in these first exit polls. But, I mean, if you just do the math, if you combine them, let's say, with the Conservatives, for example, you're talking about a huge number compared to the parties that are now in power in this country. So with that in mind, talk to me about where this vote could take the AfD moving forward here in Germany.
Look, the AFD basically, I just heard the co-leader out of shot here just saying that, hey, we're not bothered about surveys. The most important survey for them is the one on election day. And they say that the voters stuck with them, despite the scandals, despite all the negative headlines, the voters stuck with them. So they think that their message, which is tough on migration, which is anti-EU, frankly. This is a party that wants to scrap the European Parliament. It's in its manifesto. So they say that this is ultimately a vindication that they are striking the right notes with voters. And ultimately, what it does is it says, Come and catch us in the eastern, as I say, in the eastern German election states that are coming up in September of this year. They're going to be really in a strong position to go out and win those elections, Brent.
Matthew, stay with us here. Let me just ask our producer, Tom, if they could pull up that graphic of these exit poll numbers so maybe our viewers can look at it as we're talking about it. Talk to me a little bit, Matthew, about the scandals while we're waiting for that graphic to come up that the AFD has been worried about.
Brent, I'll tell you, the scandals involved the two main candidates for the European parliamentary elections, two people who are not in the room tonight because they've been told that they're persona non grata, frankly. The AFD had to put out a statement saying that they'd badly damaged, that the Maximilian Krah, the main candidate, had badly damaged the party's reputation. And the links, and the scandal is this, that his closest aide in the European election, in the European Parliament where he sits, has been arrested on suspicion of spying for China. He then later said, made some remarks about SS soldiers not being automatically criminal. That went down incredibly badly, to such an extent that Marine Le Pen decided to chuck the party, expel the party from the grouping in the European Parliament. And then the second lead candidate is accused of taking money from a Russian billionaire trying to spread disinformation in the European elections. All of this went down like a bucket of sec, but it hasn't deterred voters because in 2019 the AFD got 11% and now they're looking like getting something like 16%, which by their standards is a huge, remarkable result.
And so the numbers that we're getting in so far, are they, for the AFD, they're giving them, and those numbers are now coming up right there, the numbers are giving them hope for regional elections coming up later this year and also for the national elections next year. I mean, if you look at the numbers now, we're talking about the second largest political force in the country, Matthew. I mean, is that what you're hearing? I mean, are they getting their mojo back, if you will, with these numbers?
Well, they're saying that all these attempts, these scandals, they don't have cut through with voters, and that voters basically are listening to their message and are responding to it well. And ultimately what they're saying tonight here is that although they've come second, they're looking like coming second tonight, they are on course to win, and they're going to go out and try and win those three crucial state elections in eastern Germany. And if they do that, it would really ruffle major feathers because they're the first far-right party to win a state election in post-war Germany. And ultimately, then the big prize is next year, the national elections, and all of this is vindication for them, and it's a huge, as I say, it's a huge gust of wind in their sails.
DW's Matthew Moore at the headquarters here in Berlin for the AFD, the Alternative for Germany party. Matthew, thank you.